The Execution of Benjamin Ritchie and the Uncomfortable Truth About American Justice. By Worldwire News Desk on May 20, 2025, the state of Indiana carried out the execution of Benjamin Ritchie, a man convicted of killing police officer William Toney during a foot chase in 2000. Ritchie had been on death row for over 2 decades. But what has reignited national and ethical debates isn't just the gravity of his crime, it's who he was when he committed it. Ritchie wasn't your typical capital offender. He had fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, brain damage from childhood lead poisoning, and had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Experts testified that his mental development was akin to that of a child. And yet, despite repeated appeals for clemency and the last-minute plea to the U.S. Supreme Court, the state pressed forward. This moment isn't just about one man. It's about what kind of justice system we uphold and how it measures the value of life when mental capacity is diminished. The law versus morality. When they diverged legally, Ritchie was eligible for execution. The courts found no procedural errors in his original trial, and the Indiana Parole Board unanimously denied clemency. Governor Mike Braun authorized the execution without delay. But legality is not morality. Forensic psychologist Dr. Megan Carter testified that Ritchie's mental impairments were so severe he functioned like a child. If the law exists to deliver justice, not vengeance, should it not consider intent, cognitive capacity, and the ability to fully comprehend one's actions? The U.S. Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. So the question becomes, is it cruel to execute a man who never developed the judgment of an adult? A brain damaged by forces beyond his control. Benjamin Ritchie didn't choose his impairments. He was born with brain damage due to alcohol exposure in the womb, a fate sealed before he ever took his first breath. Later, he suffered additional cognitive damage from growing up in a lead-contaminated neighborhood. These are the very social and environmental factors we acknowledge as public health crises until the people impacted by them become criminal defendants. Disability rights advocates warn that executing individuals with FASD or similar disorders sets a dangerous precedent. If we do not differentiate between willful intent and developmental incapacity, then capital punishment becomes less about justice and more about punishment for being born disadvantaged. Real lives, real losses. None of this is to diminish the pain of the Toney family. Officer William Toney was a public servant who died in the line of duty. His life matters. His loss matters. But justice, to be just, must weigh accountability with capacity. It must consider whether someone knew and understood the consequences of their actions in the way society expects of a fully developed adult. Ritchie expressed remorse during his clemency hearings. "I've ruined my life and other people's lives, and I'm so sorry for that night." His words reflect guilt, but also, tragically, a man struggling to fully grasp the magnitude of what he had done. The bigger picture. America's position on the death penalty. The United States remains one of the few developed nations to still actively practice the death penalty. In 2025 alone, 9 executions have been carried out across 5 states, and more are scheduled. But public opinion is shifting. According to Pew Research, 2024, support for capital punishment has fallen to 55%, the lowest in 50 years. And with growing understanding of mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders, Americans are beginning to ask harder questions. Are we executing people who never had the full capacity to choose differently? Should the death penalty be reserved only for the most calculated, intentional acts of evil? Conclusion. Justice or just another failure? The execution of Benjamin Ritchie should force us to look in the mirror. It challenges us to reconsider what it truly means to be just in a system that so often fails the very people it was meant to protect, those born into brokenness, into systems of poverty, trauma, and mental illness. We claim to be a nation of justice and redemption. But if we cannot find compassion for the mentally impaired, what does that say about us? Final thought. If mercy is the measure of a moral society, Then what do we become when we show none to those who never had a chance?